Hey Mel, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thanks so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So today we're talking about math stories, and I would love our audience to hear about your math story. So Mel Blumenthal is a financial planner with the Hopman Group, and she's been doing that for the last 6 years. And I heard her math story several weeks ago when we were talking with a group of people, and it was so interesting. And I decided to have her on, and I'm going to let her take it from here. So go ahead. It's all yours.
Okay, so my math story begins in elementary school. And I remember actually being pretty good at math, really arithmetic.
Mhm.
But I always noticed that the girls in the math classes weren't really being socialized um, to be encouraged to be good at math or to really be encouraged at all to excel in.
Mhm.
I remember taking timed arithmetic tests,
Yeah.
and I would always do just as well as the top sort of boys in the class.
Mhm.
And when the teacher would call the top scores in the class, it would always be the boys. Even
Mhm.
though my score would be just as high, my name was never called. And I always thought that was really odd. So very early on, I started noticing some discrepancies in how boys were treated when it came to mathematics and how girls were treated. And then very shortly after it was basic arithmetic, I started to struggle a little bit when it came to math. And then I just started to sort of fall off in terms of my ability and my aptitude. I never really got help. Um, I was always really inclined towards the arts. I grew up in theater, um, and I was always tracked that way.
Mhm. Interesting.
My teachers and everybody else is just like, oh, well, Mel does theater and she does all of these things. And I was just pushed in that direction. Any natural ability or aptitude that I had, because I had it towards mathematics, was just completely blown off because, well, oh, you're good at this. I would tend to say, you're a girl, you belong over here.
Right. Right.
So, and then as I, got older and the math started to get more difficult, um, I really struggled. And I kept telling myself I wasn't good at it. So by the time algebra came along, I had really sort of um, established like a math phobia. I hated math. I had anxiety about math. My grandfather was an engineer and my father was an engineer. So um, they sort of expected me to be able to excel in this area. And when I didn't initially, there was a lot of pressure on me to be able to. So uh, my dad would try to tutor me in math. He didn't have the most patience when it came to that. So that
Mhm.
compounded
That
the
must have been
error.
hard. Yeah.
And it was just a terrible experience. I used to have anxiety nightmares about math. So it was a really unpleasant experience for me, which doesn't make a lot of sense now that I am in finance.
Right.
And that would have shocked me as well if you were to tell my teenage self, hey, you're actually going to go be a financial advisor and have to deal with some pretty complex, mathematics.
Mhm.
So I would have laughed at you, my teenage self. But yeah, it was definitely a struggle. But I think that really stems from, at least, I came up in school in the 80s and the 90s, and from women not really being socialized to be, in the same way that the boys and the men are when it comes to mathematics.
Yeah. I mean, that's so interesting. And yesterday I interviewed a woman who was in grade school in the 50s, and she was talking about that exact same thing. So it took some time. It's taken time for
Yeah.
that to change for sure. And our, you're being in school in the 80s and 90s. I mean, that wasn't that long ago, you know.
No, not that long
So,
ago.
so it's really interesting. So what was the turning point, or what made you go into financial planning, and when did you start to feel more comfortable with being in a profession that is really based on math?
Right. I fell into it a bit on accident, actually.
Mhm,
And I really saw, I was working in education and social services,
mhm,
two professions where, the math phobia was still strong.
mhm,
And then I had the opportunity to make a career shift and go into retirement consulting. And
mhm,
there, I really saw the need for retirement consultants. And I've now built my practice around being able to do financial planning,
mhm,
not exclusively geared towards, but with women in mind.
mhm.
Because as we've seen, women are sort of inherently disenfranchised by the retirement system for a number of reasons. That's a whole other topic of conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
But when I saw that with a firm that I was with prior to joining the Hopman Group, I really saw that it was important to have a financial practice and financial planning geared towards that. So I knew that that was going to mean, well, you got to get some financial math under your belt. So I knew that was going to be a challenge, but it's you have to do it.
Yeah. So
Um,
how long did that take? How long did that training take for you to feel pretty comfortable with helping people in this area?
it's an ongoing process.
Mhm.
So fortunately, there are a lot of equations you have to learn. But I'm going to be honest with you, a lot is you can do with calculators
Sure.
these days.
Mhm.
But no, I mean, there's a lot of, equations I had to do. I'll be honest, it probably took me longer than most people who have to study for the examinations
Mhm.
to do those things. I put off doing one of the major
Mhm.
examinations longer because I was afraid of the math involved.
Mhm. Interesting. I'm sure
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's great that you did that. I mean, I give you so much credit for taking that on. That's awesome. Well, thank you. It's so interesting that you went from, what you went through in high school and elementary, high school, and you went into the arts, really more the arts, and
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
and now in finances. That's fantastic. So if you were going to complete the sentence, math is, how would you finish that sentence?
Math is so important for everybody to know in the right context and the right thing.
Hmm.
We need so much more math education in the public school systems, but it needs to be financial literacy. I
Yeah.
maintain to this day, I didn't need to know algebra 4 trigonometry.
Yeah.
I needed to know how mortgages worked. I needed to understand, credit card financing. We need math. We need financial literacy.
Oh, it's so true. Yeah. I
Yeah.
know. Yeah. My daughter had the option of taking math for, I don't remember the name of the course was, but it was more of like a math for life or math applications.
Consumer
Um,
math.
yeah. Or pre-calculus. And she kind of needed both. So unfortunately, she had to make the choice between pre-calc and math applications. And the math applications, I don't think she'll ever use the pre-calc. Um, and the math applications actually really would have been a good choice. So, but um, so one more question. If you wanted to give one piece of advice to a young parent, what would it be?
Um, Specifically regarding
Like math and like
math.
math at home, like the nurturing part of math at home when you're a young child. What would you what would you recommend that they do?
Ooh. Um, Try to have patience, be encouraging, find a way to make it fun.
Mhm.
That's definitely something that was missing, and try to find a way to implement real life practical application.
Mhm. Good.
I think that for those of us, because I was definitely one of those kiddos at a certain level who's
Mhm.
struggling with math,
Mhm.
having real life practical application
Mhm.
might help uh, find a way to have it click in for
Mhm.
those kiddos who are struggling more.
No, that sounds great. That's super advice. So anyway, Mel, thank you so much for joining me today. This is great. You have a great story, some great advice for other parents, and I wish you the best. So
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.